All these players had great weeks this past week. Now, they're not all flying up my rankings for one reason or another, though. Some of them definitely are, but I'm going to rank the guys that are moving the least up to the guys that are moving the most, starting with Saquon Barkley. The reason he's down here is obviously he doesn't have that much room to move up, but I do have him currently at RB3. I have him ranked as the third most valuable player in fantasy behind Bijan and Breece Hall. And my thought process with Barkley is, yet again, we see the big playability. We see the usage as a receiver. We see the usage at the goal line. The fact that there's no other running back in this backfield with a legitimate role. Going, okay, well, Braylon Allen is taking some work away from Breece Hall. With the case of Bijan Robinson, Atlanta's not nearly as good of an offense as what you have in Philly. And we haven't seen the same true big playability from Bijan Robinson that we've had with Saquon Barkley. So I'm considering moving Barkley up to 1, but it's obviously not a big move regardless. Our next guy, Dallas Goedert. Now, I know Dallas Goedert is probably going to be moving for a ton of people out here. My thought process with Goedert, just to let you know, I have him at tight end 9. I have him right behind Pitts, Ferguson, right ahead of Andrews Ingram. I personally think that the massive spike week that we just had was a function of no AJ Brown and a limited Devonta Smith, where Smith left, I believe, in the third quarter and did not come back through the entire game. I think that we can safely say, okay, if you have no AJ Brown, if you have no Smith, Dallas Goedert is the best weapon that this team has as a receiver. So in that instance, the target share is going to dramatically go up, where he goes from being the third option in this passing offense to the first. And yes, Goedert is going to absolutely crush. But going into the future, it's not like Devonta Smith is on the IR. It's not like AJ Brown is on the IR. I would expect that maybe we get one or not both of these receivers back this next week. And Dallas Goedert goes back to the guy that he was all along. I mean, Dallas Goedert has been in Philly with Jalen Hurts for a very, very, very long time. I don't necessarily think anything is too different with this situation. Now, going over to our next player, we are going to be looking at Kiron Williams. Kiron doesn't really move in my running back rankings. I had Kiron Williams at running back 8 before the week, and after the week, he'll still be at running back 8. He's still right behind Alvin Kamara, still right behind Jonathan Taylor, but I was getting really nervous here with all the injuries that you had at wide receiver as well as with the offensive line. I thought that there was a chance that this offense was just going to kind of collapse this past week, and clearly that didn't happen. So for me to ring the alarms and say, oh, sell Kiron Williams for Jonathan Taylor, sell Kiron Williams for Alvin Kamara, honestly, it's not necessarily nearly as warranted as maybe I made it out to be. And it looks like Kiron is going to be able to continue to chug along. So he doesn't move in my running back ranks, but I did move him up in my overall ranks, where now he's up to overall 14, where he's directly ahead of AJ Brown, Nico Collins, Marvin Harrison Jr., and that tier of wide receivers. Now, our next guy will be Rashod Rice. Rashod Rice is a freaking league winner. Okay. He's this far down the list because all these players, it's hard for them to move up, right? It's hard for them to go up too many slots. But I think Rice will move from wide receiver 7 in my rankings to, I think he jumps Nico Collins. I think he may jump Tyreek Hill. I think Rashod Rice may end up being wide receiver 5 in my rest of season rankings, only behind Lamb, Jefferson, Chase, and St. Brown. And honestly, if we knew that Tua was not coming back, then easily he is ahead of Tyreek Hill for me here. But I'm going to be sitting here debating on this. But regardless, he can't move up that much because he's already near the top. Now, somebody that can move up a considerable amount is going to be Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, I moved up to QB 15. I have him directly behind guys like Dak, Baker, Purdy, directly ahead of Lawrence, Fields, Cousins. And looking at Sam Darnold, he has been phenomenal with injuries in his offense as well. Obviously, you had Justin Jefferson missing a decent section of time in the week 2 game. You've had no Jordan Addison for a couple games now. And you've had no TJ Hawkinson. So to go through and try to map this out and what this offense looks like in the long term, when we actually add back in Jordan Addison, when you actually add back in TJ Hawkinson, I think that Darnold can just continue to get better in a way. Now, Sam Darnold has 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions so far this season. The limitation with Darnold is obviously he's not going to have the rushing upside, which is why I still think that he is just probably about QB 15. You're going to be considering him every single week as a potential streamer based off matchup. But for my own team right now, I'm probably planning on dropping Geno Smith and picking up Sam Darnold in the Flock League. Now, speaking of the Flock League, somebody that just crushed me was Devon Singletary. Now, it was embarrassing how low we ranked Devon Singletary this past week. I barely ranked Singletary as a consideration for the flex, which the reason being, I thought it was a very tough matchup going up against Cleveland. Sportsbooks had the Giants as the lowest scoring offense in the NFL. Yada, 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 yada. None of that matters because Singletary gets all the volume here. Not only does Singletary have volume as a rusher, but what's very surprising is the usage that you have as a receiver. Singletary comes out and he actually has 4 receptions for 43 receiving yards. And trust me, as somebody who's going up against Singletary this week, I felt that pain of that cheap reception volume where it actually just boosted up Singletary to actually come away with 20 plus fantasy points. And if you look at the underlying snaps, Singletary plays 49 out of 71 snaps. He is the true 3-down back here in New York. And this is now back-to-back games where Daniel Jones hasn't looked horrible. So honestly, going into the future, if the Giants are a better offense than we were projecting them coming into the season, primarily off the back of Malik Neighbors being so damn good, I mean, Singletary could be a viable play. Now going over to Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed obviously was not a receiver that came out and gave you, league-winning week, right? No, Jaden Reed, he was on your bench, and he really only scored 9 fantasy points. It wasn't a big deal one way or another. But looking at the underlying involvement in this offense, that's what I'm getting excited about here. If you're looking at Jaden Reed, this is a wide receiver that has 6 targets off of only 19 pass attempts for Malik Willis. That's good for almost a 33% team target share. And as we project this offense to just dramatically improve with the overall passing volume, with Jordan Love coming back in, plus the positive reports that we had with Jordan Love's recovery this past week, I do think it's very possible that Jordan Love's going to be coming back into this offense in week 4. All of a sudden, Jaden Reed is just going to have a massive jump with the overall volume that he can expect as this team decides to skew a little bit more towards the pass and away from the run. They had 37 rush attempts, only 19 pass attempts this week. Obviously, things will look very different with Jordan Love. Right now in our wide receiver ranks, I do have Jaden Reed currently ranked as that borderline flex at wide receiver 35, but as we get Love back in for sure, I wouldn't be surprised if he jumps up a little bit closer to maybe the wide receiver 28 range. I definitely think he can't get ahead of T. Higgins. T. Higgins at wide receiver 23 is actually my favorite underdog pick tonight, where you can actually get Higgins for more than 45.5 receiving yards and a great matchup going up against the Washington Commanders. And if you use code FLOCK with that link in the description or comment section, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus on top of that, you will get a free Joe Burrow pick, more than less than half a total yard for the Monday night game. And also, if you use code FLOCK, you're going to get an additional free team review from myself in a live stream through flockfantasy.com. So make sure you take advantage of that with the link in the comment section. But going over to DeAndre Hopkins here, DeAndre Hopkins went from a receiver that in my rankings, you could not even consider, even ask about starting. Like there was no way in hell that I thought you could start DeAndre Hopkins this past week. To now, I actually moved DeAndre Hopkins up to about wide receiver 42. He's right behind guys like Michael Pittman Jr., Terry McLaurin, Keon Coleman, and he honestly may continue to move up this list because Hopkins dominates the target share in this offense, where Hopkins leads this team with a total of 7 targets, and this is off of not that many snaps. Hopkins actually only plays 25 out of 54 snaps in this offense, recovering from this knee injury. So if we continue to see the snap participation go up for Hopkins here in Tennessee, and this market share and this just efficiency from a per snap perspective carries over, Hopkins could continue to rise up to eventually being a wide receiver 3 and then maybe a wide receiver 2. Now, Aaron Jones will be our next player. I have to take a massive L with Aaron Jones. If the Vikings are going to continue to play this good a defense and actually win football games, the game environment's going to be very good. And Aaron Jones not only is in a much better game environment and offense than we were initially expecting, but at the same time, the receiving involvement is still there. Aaron Jones this past week had 6 targets in this offense for 5 receptions, 46 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. Now, I will be a little bit cautious. I don't want to rank Aaron Jones as a running back 1 by any means, because Ty Chandler still does have a very large role here. Chandler plays 22 snaps this past week. Ty Chandler actually sees the majority of the work in the 2-minute drill. Ty Chandler still sees a decent amount of work in third down situations, where according to this PFF data, you're actually seeing Ty Chandler have 5 snaps on third down in comparison to Aaron Jones only at 3 this week. But still, I think Aaron Jones you can view as a locked and loaded RB2 from a week-to-week perspective. I have him RB16 rest of season. Somebody else that I need to take a massive L on is Derrick Henry. I mean, Derrick Henry, obviously, we've had as that must-start player, but we were just disrespecting him, saying, okay, well, he doesn't have the receiving workload. He's older, aging, doesn't look as explosive, yada, yada, yada. And Derrick Henry says, F you, you little small boy. You don't know a single thing about the game of football. We're going to drop 25 carries for 151 rushing yards and multiple rushing touchdowns on your head. Now, with Henry, this was obviously the perfect game environment. I mean, the score at half was 21-6. Through the first 3 quarters, it was 28-6. So this was a complete blowout, right? I mean, the game itself was very different than what the final score would indicate. And you did have 45 rushing attempts. In comparison, only 15 Lamar Jackson pass attempts in this game against the Dallas Cowboys. Plus, the Dallas Cowboys have had a very soft run defense up until this point, and this continues to show it with 274 rushing yards from the Baltimore Ravens. But this does reiterate that this is a team that is wanting to run the ball any chance they get. If they're winning, or even at the very beginning of the game, their number one plan is to force feed Derrick Henry, read options with Lamar, and allow Lamar to go out there and get 14 carries, 87 rushing yards. And those weren't traditional dropbacks. A lot of these were designed runs for Lamar Jackson. So I have Derrick Henry. I had to move him up. I believe I had Derrick Henry running back 15, 16 coming into the week. Now I have Derrick Henry moving up to RB 13. I have him ranked back-to-back with Mixon, Josh Jacobs. And honestly, I think we may want to flip Henry ahead of those other backs. My hesitation is still in a full PPR format. You're not going to have any usage as a receiver. He only had 1 reception this week. Now going over to somebody that was moving up dramatically after Thursday, we got to talk about Braylon Allen here. Now with Braylon Allen coming into week 3, my perspective on him was 100% he needs to be on your roster, right? This is a running back that is an injury away from all of a sudden being a true league winner. If Breece Hall were to go down, he can be a low-end RB1 based off his ability as a receiver, his size, and the athleticism he showed at the NFL Combine. But I thought that Braylon Allen had absolutely no standalone appeal. I didn't think that he was going to be a play even with a healthy Breece Hall. But you're actually seeing Braylon Allen continue to expand his role in this offense. So I think now you are in a situation in which I could very easily see us getting to weeks 5, 6, 7. You're having to deal with a couple buys plus an injury, and you go, you know what? I'm rostering Braylon Allen at the bottom end of this team, primarily for the upside if anything were to occur to Breece. But now, can we just go ahead and start Braylon Allen? He's going to get 10 touches. He's a good enough running back, talented enough running back that he can, potentially do something big with a limited workload. So definitely not somebody that's going to be like my top 24 running back rankings this week with a healthy Breece Hall, but somebody that I think you can be so excited about in the case that if anything were to occur to Breece, he is a running back 1, and you can possibly put him in as a bye week desperation play. Now, our next option will be Najee Harris, and to be honest with you, I'm way more excited, and I moved Braylon Allen way higher up than Najee Harris. I don't know why I waited this long to put Najee on this list. But regardless, if you're looking at Najee Harris here, he does submit himself. No, he's not splitting with Jalen Warren now. I don't want to take too many things away from this 1 week in Pittsburgh, which is why Najee Harris should be further down this list. He shouldn't be this exciting. Because 1, you do have Cordell Patterson mixing in. It does look like this may be turning into a 3-man running back by committee to some capacity. And 2, we didn't have the workload really there for Jalen Warren in week 1. Then it comes there in week 2. Now it's gone in week 3. And may seem like Arthur Smith is just, I don't know, taking this from a game-to-game perspective and doing whatever the hell he feels like. I don't know if we can take too much away from a single performance here in Pittsburgh and try to extrapolate it throughout. But as it stands right now, Najee did get some work as a receiver in this offense. Najee did dominate the overall touches in this backfield. Jaylen Warren really did scale back dramatically. Now, our next mover is going to be Cole Kmet. And Cole Kmet is somebody that your boy may end up having to go and try to pick up in the flock league. Because with no Sam Laporta, I mean, with the tight end position just collapsing all around itself, you actually see Kmet taking a massive step forward. The usage that you had with Cole Kmet was very concerning, both in the preseason as well as through the first 2 weeks of the year as well, where Gerald Everett was running a ton of routes. Gerald Everett was seeing some targets as well, whereas Everett really does slide backwards, where if you're looking at the usage, Cole Kmet actually dramatically goes up if you are looking at this PFF chart in terms of his snap rate over time. And at the same time, you're seeing 40 routes run for Cole Kmet in this offense, which is, I mean, not too far off of DJ Moore at 54. Cole Kmet at the same time sees a ton of targets. I mean, he comes away with 11 targets. He has 10 receptions, 97 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown to go along with it. And honestly, here with Kmet, the reason I was okay drafting him, even during the preseason, particularly in underdog drafts, was just because I thought, okay, well, yeah, the Gerald Everett usage is maybe a little concerning, but at the end of the day, Cole Kmet's just a better player. And I think when you put up a performance like this in an offense that's having a very hard time moving the ball down the field, it's a difficult spot to just go right back to Everett. I mean, Everett only had 16 routes run here, so it does look like Kmet is definitely turning into that tight end that we could presumably start every week. Like, I'm thinking about putting Kmet over Isaiah Likely in my rest of season ranks. Now, going over to somebody that jumped up to tight end 8 in our rest of season ranks, I believe from tight end 10, he jumped Mark Andrews. Jake Ferguson. With Ferguson here, the issue that you have in Dallas is, outside of CeeDee Lamb, they don't really have any real playmakers, whether that's at wide receiver, whether that's at running back. I mean, this is a team that's kind of desperate for somebody that's going to go out there and be able to help them move the sticks. And Ferguson comes out in his first week back from this injury. He actually dominates the target share. He has 11 targets in this offense. He has 6 receptions for 95 receiving yards as well. So when you're seeing the tight end landscape just be absolutely decimated from top to bottom, to get this kind of performance from Jake Ferguson, I think he's a locked and loaded mid tight end 1 going into the future, and somebody that you have to be excited about. Now, going over to some wide receivers here, let's talk about Mr. Cooper. Let's talk about Amari. And dear God, I wish this man was on my team. But anyway, 12 targets out of 37 Deshaun Watson pass attempts. Amari is continuing to dominate the targets here in Cleveland. Now, through the first 2 weeks, he was horribly inefficient with these targets. The expectation was you were going to get natural regression. That's why Amari was ranked as somebody that you needed to start this week, just based off that opportunity. And yeah, he comes through in a big time way. He comes away with multiple receiving touchdowns. What's maybe a little more encouraging than just the raw fantasy points is you actually see the Elijah Moore usage scale back dramatically, where what we had through the first 3 weeks is Elijah Moore was actually right up there, kind of close to Amari Cooper in terms of just total receiving volume, where Elijah Moore only has 3 targets this week, Jerry Jeudy only has 7, and Amari is up to that 33% team target share. So he does look like somebody that you're having to start every single week, even if it's a bad offense. Now, going over to somebody that has been a must-start guy every single week, regardless of it being a bad offense, Malik Neighbors, we had ranked as a wide receiver 2, and dear God, that is not looking good. So we had him ranked as wide receiver 2 this week. It's a tough matchup going up against Cleveland. Didn't think that there were going to be too many points scored in this offense. My rest of season rankings, I had Malik Neighbors ranked at wide receiver 13. And now I'm in a situation where I've moved Neighbors up to wide receiver 11 already. I think he is a top 12 option rest of season. But what it comes down to is, okay, well, would I rather have Malik Neighbors or Garrett Wilson? Would I rather have Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr.? Because it's a wide receiver that has 12 targets this game with 34 Daniel Jones pass attempts. Yet again, seeing that market share number over 30%, after in week 2, seeing over 50% of this team's receiving volume. Daniel Jones has looked better through the past 2 weeks than what we saw in week 1. It looks like Daniel Jones, hopefully, is maybe turning a corner. I mean, this was a tough matchup against Cleveland. See, I think Malik Neighbors is no longer in like, okay, yeah, you have to start him as a wide receiver 2. I think it's now more so, okay, you may have to start him as a wide receiver 1. But somebody who had more space to move up than Malik Neighbors was actually Rome Odunze. Looking at Rome previously, I didn't consider him at all this week. I mean, we had a couple questions, people are dealing with injuries, and it's like, okay, I guess you can play him. You have no Keenan Allen. But by no means did I view Rome Odunze as some must-start option. But now it looks like Rome has a very real shot not to just play ahead of Keenan Allen here rest of season, but at the same time to potentially leapfrog DJ Moore, where obviously he is a phenomenal prospect, was selected inside the top 10 picks of the NFL draft this past season. Keenan Allen, we don't really have a timetable for his return here. So what I would say with Rome is, in terms of what we are doing with him in the immediate term, if Keenan Allen's not back in week 4, you have to start Rome. Obviously, we expect the overall passing volume to come down, and I'm not expecting us to have 50 Caleb Williams pass attempts every single week going into the future. But if we expect that Rome can actually take a few more of these targets from somebody like Cole Kmet, and Rome can continue to improve as just you'd naturally expect one of these top-end rookies too, I think Rome's kind of a must-start guy with no Keenan Allen in this offense. Even when Keenan comes back, I think Rome is in play for flex consideration, and that's in the short term. In the long term, Rome could very easily turn into a high-end wide receiver too, especially if Caleb Williams is somehow able to get better. Now, going over to somebody that's been a must-start guy, a must-bench guy for us for 3 straight weeks now, Deontay Johnson, dear God. And there were people in the live stream going, hey, Mason, can I start Adam Thielen? Hey, Mason, can I start Deontay Johnson? And I was going, oh, no, it can't be worse than Bryce Young, but can we not wait to see it? And I'm sorry, y'all should have just started him. Oh, my gosh, Deontay Johnson, 122 receiving yards, 8 receptions, and the receiving touchdown. You know what? Let me see the last time you had a game like this from Deontay. As obviously, this is a wide receiver that a couple years ago, was going out and just dominating the targets in Pittsburgh. But the last time Deontay Johnson had over 100 receiving yards in a game, was it 2021? Dear God. The last time Deontay Johnson had 100 receiving yards in a game was December 5th, 2021. The last time Deontay Johnson had 120 plus receiving yards in a game it's never happened. This was Deontay Johnson's career high, best game of his life. I believe Andy Dalton is the first quarterback in the NFL this season to have 3 passing touchdowns and 300 passing yards in the same game. Deontay goes from somebody that was a must-bench guy for us through the first 3 weeks under the assumption that this Panthers offense was going to be a train wreck to all of a sudden, he is very much in play for wide receiver 2 or at minimum flex consideration here. And I know people are going to say, Mason, of course you're starting him. I do think that maybe we see the Panthers offense come back down to earth just a bit. The Bengals right now are favored by 5.5 points going up against Carolina, with Carolina being at home this next week. I'm sure that's going to change a bunch after the Bengals game itself tonight. But if you look at where I rank Deontay going into the future, I put Deontay Johnson at wide receiver 31 in the same range as like Tank Dell, Xavier Worthy, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Obviously, this offense is much better without Bryce Young, but at the same time, I'm not expecting Deontay Johnson to legitimately be the best version of himself that we've ever seen. I do think that Dalton's passing volume comes down a bit. Now, the number one riser has to be Jaan Jennings. Jennings goes from a waiver wire player to all of a sudden a must-start option this next week with no Deebo Samuel and no Ricky Pearsall, to a flex consideration possibly, even when we get Deebo Samuel back in, even when you potentially get George Kittle back in. Now, I'm not going to, obviously we want to react. I don't want to overreact here. I moved Jaan Jennings to like the wide receiver 4 range alongside Ladd McConkey, Khalil Shakir, Christian Kirk, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, Keon Coleman. He just put up the best game that we have seen of any player in fantasy all season. But if we are going to be realistic, Deebo Samuel plays over him and sees more targets when Deebo comes back. Brandon Ayuk is still the wide receiver ahead of Jennings. There's 120 million reasons for that. Jaan Jennings is a 27-year-old wide receiver. It's not like we're naturally expecting him to all of a sudden finally put it together and finally figure it out. Phenomenal game. Unbelievable. If you started him, you made a great call. I read somebody in the comment section on the last video saying they started him over T. Higgins, which is something that I personally would not have done, but obviously I would have made that massive mistake in playing T. Higgins over Jaan Jennings. I think he's a must-start play this next week, but when you have the healthy receivers back in this offense, I think it's very, very difficult to project him out, so it's going to be so hard to rank him right now. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, if you enjoyed it, please go down there, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And of course, if you wanted to check out any of those picks over there on Underdog Fantasy, if you use promo code FLOCK, you are going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you will get a free pick. If you do that before Monday, it's going to be Joe Burrow more than less than half a total yard. After Monday, it'll be somebody in the Thursday night game. You'll get a free team review in a live stream through flockfantasy.com. You just need to make sure that you have an account set up on flockfantasy.com. It can be a free account with the same email address that you use on Underdog, so I know how to get you that free team voucher. And also, if you are looking at an Underdog pick'em tonight, I personally do like T. Higgins to have more than 45.5 receiving yards this week. But I think that's what I got for you. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day and hope we get to see you out with a live stream after the game tonight.